Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Cohen. Today I'm going to talk to you about the best way to read passages on SAT critical reading and on ACT reading. It all comes down to reading as actively as you can. So there's 4 questions that you want to ask yourself as you read. So the first question is, what's happening in the passage? What's being described? The second question is, what's the main point or the main idea of the passage? The third question is, how does everything in the passage fit together? How's it organized? And the fourth question is, why did the author take the time to write this? What's his own opinion? Okay, some passages are a little bit easier and what's being described is really clear and easy to understand. In other passages, maybe a tough science or technical passage, it's not totally clear what is happening. So you kind of have to pause and take some time to ask yourself what's really going on. You may have to do a little bit of extra thinking and give yourself a little extra time to figure that out on some of those really tough passages. Now, in a fiction passage, this is often the case because a fiction passage might not tell you what is happening in the beginning. So you might not know what's really going on until halfway through the fiction passage. And that's okay. That's just how it's written. But what you want to do is, once you hit that point in the passage where you know what's going on, then you want to look back and try and make sense of the start of the passage. Okay, so the second question, what's the main point? The way to think about this is that the main point is what pretty much everything in the passage is trying to convey. So everything the author is writing is really, what can you boil it down to? What's it all saying? What's, in one sentence, the one point or idea that everything relates back to? And a helpful way to find this is to look at the first and second paragraph. It usually shows up in the first or second paragraph and in the final paragraph, especially the last sentence or last couple of sentences. Another helpful place to look when you're trying to pin down the main idea is the title of the passage and any description of the passage. If either of these two are provided, make sure to look at them because they can often tell you really valuable information about what the passage is primarily about. The third thing to look for is how everything fits together. So in some passages, there's a shift in the middle of the passage where there's a slight shift in topic, or the author might introduce a new opinion halfway through the passage. So you want to keep track of that and say, what are the main parts of the passage and what's going on in them and how do they relate to each other? And how does each paragraph relate to the passage as a whole? And this is really helpful too if you're having trouble understanding a paragraph. So instead of just thinking about that paragraph in and of itself, try and think about how it might relate to everything else you've read in the passage. And that will help you figure out what's going on. Okay, the last and really important question to ask is, why did the author write this? What's the author's agenda? Are they just passively conveying information, telling you what happened? Or do they have an opinion? Are they trying to convince you of something? Be prepared to pay really close attention to the author's own opinion because it's often very subtle. It might be an ironic comment, it might be an exclamation point that gives it away, it might be something within parentheses. They often might not come out really strongly and tell you their position. As you're actively reading and asking these 4 questions, it can be really helpful to make annotations. There's 2 great ways to do this. One is to draw lines where there's a major shift in the passage, in topic or opinion, and this breaks the passage up into its main parts. It's very easy to see visually. Another thing is to write down the main idea of a paragraph or group of paragraphs. As you're working with individual paragraphs, Typically, you want to pay the most attention to the opening sentence or two and the final sentence, because that's normally where the author conveys the main point of that paragraph. And then you can usually read more quickly through the details in the body of the paragraph, because these details are just supporting the main idea. Now, don't get too caught up in the details. Don't worry about memorizing them. By knowing what each paragraph is about, you'll know where to find those details if you later need them for a question. It's a lot easier to read actively, and you'll read a lot better if you're excited about the passage. So try and get excited. Now, one thing you can do if the passage isn't an interest of yours is try and relate it to something that you're interested in. So let's say the passage is about bats, and you have no interest in bats. Okay? But maybe as a kid, you were really into Batman. So try and think about the passage in terms of Batman. Think, this is the history or backstory to Batman. That can really help. Another way to get really engaged is to pretend that you're going to have a debate with the author. So try and take the other side of the author's argument, and this can get you, passionate, and it can get you to read a lot more actively.